someone now, direct from communist East Berlin, by way of a trailer park in the Midwest. Let's put your hands together and welcome the internationally ignored Hedwig Reunion.
Don't you know me, baby? Don't you know me? Don't you know me, Kansas City? I'm the new Berlin Wall. Try to tear me down. I was born on the other side of a town ripped in two.
When's the last time one of us were here? This has been like
4 years ago.
99, almost 20 years ago.
Yeah, recently, but
I came here a month ago.
Oh, really? You did? You're like partying here?
Of course, just a
I came
party.
to a party here 3 years ago.
3 years ago.
Yeah.
This is where we did the off-Broadway production
Yeah.
of Hedwig in this ballroom when it was a shithole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the stage.
Behind the fireplace.
Behind the fireplace. That exit was our way out of the stage. That exit was the way in.
Oh, right.
That's how you would come in.
We would
come
come down
in.
like the long sort of tunnel. We would hang out there,
Yeah.
and then we would rub your boobs for luck before each show. Do you remember that? It was like a talisman. We had to rub
Like
the
a
boobs
tanuki.
for luck.
There'd be tears, and you'd have to shove him out.
There were 2 bathrooms there, and if somebody had to go to the bathroom during the show, John
Would follow
walk
them.
off the stage and follow them.
And then you would hear, do you
To the
remember that? And
bathroom.
then you would hear John would go, number 1 and number 2. and you're always number 1 with me.
And I always flushed whatever was going
And you
on.
would come out with toilet paper.
Yeah, and friends were like, "There's brilliant sound design in this play," and I'm like, "That was real." So Cameron Manheim told us about this empty space in this Flophouse Hotel where the surviving crew of the Titanic stayed, and we were in the tower at the top, and we'd walk down or get help from our lovely elevator operator.
But usually,
6
He was
floors.
really lovely.
He was really sweet. But you know, we were sharing it with other New Yorkers who were hanging in there. Peter Askin, who was our amazing director and producer, built us a theater here. And we weren't welcome anywhere else. We were rejected.
There was a theater that we went to see, I think it was on 9th Avenue, and they hadn't had a show in over 5 years, and they turned us down.
A closed theater.
but don't you
turned
feel
us
like
down.
that is the story? I feel like being rejected and being the underdog and being told no, that just feels like a theme for the show
And
in the
our-
right way, for
in our
Hedwig.
lives.
Right, and in all of our
Sin-
lives.
How has it changed since?
You know, I bet you're wondering how some girly boy named Hans from communist East Germany became the stunning creature barely standing before you.
You know, when Stephen and I first did it at Squeezebox, which is fairly close to a club, we weren't thinking about even a place this nice. It was just like, what are we going to do that's really special, and how can we learn from the queens and performers at the drag club where you were the
I was the
leader?
music director.
Yeah.
But I didn't do this. 1, 2, 3, 4.
And all the people here kind of met unexpectedly. I met Mike at Kim's Video. He was one of the surly...
Kim's video.
He's one of the surly clerks. So I said,
West Village Kims.
and like, do you have, you know,
No.
do you have von Stroheim? You're like, you haven't seen it yet? I can't give you that.
Who?
You know, and I said, I do, you know, I'm doing drag. I was trying to scare him, and he's like, I do wigs.
Wigs. I didn't do wigs.
And here he is.
Really?
I did it for my grandmother when I was 7 years old.
That's doing wigs.
But yeah.
Counts.
But Hedwig kind of like Tom Sawyer, like, well, I'm painting this fence. Come and join us. I met you on the street. You were taking a picture of Lady Bunny.
Getting into a cab.
Getting into a cab. And I thought you were cute, and I said, come on up. And you started taking pictures of me and ended up doing artwork on the film with Therese Dupre.
Because you sent me to meet her, right?
And she's
Yeah,
like,
it's just
you're
like
in.
love, you know.
And he ended up doing the bishop in a turtleneck and
The
decorating
famous photo of the Hedwig T-shirt. That's
the
based on a
Hedwig
photograph.
T-shirt,
The cape.
the flag,
Oh, the cape, yeah.
the Tommy guitar, and a lot of small art pieces. And then Frank I met at Sundance Lab. I had never directed anything, and Michelle Satter at the Lab said, I have an idea. And she put 2 of the most mismatched, no, like it was a perfect match at the Lab. And we did scenes, we practiced the scenes there that we ended up doing on the film because I didn't want to, you know, I was urged to work with someone who was really famous, and I'm like, why not work with someone who wants to be there, is going to give their all. And then we met through...
You were casting about for things. I sent you my video through Kelly Reichardt, sent it to your
Director Kelly Reichardt. I guess it was also through...
Yeah, through Killer. I mean,
through Killer
I
Films.
sent it to Killer. But the word was out that they were looking at the New York indie animators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that came through Christine Vachon and my meeting Todd Haynes. And then Miriam's the only person who came through an official...
Yeah, I remember it was my first audition that my agent sent me out in New York City.
Wow.
Like I hadn't signed with an agent yet. I met with them and they were like, well, we'll send you on this audition. And I was like, what is this? Okay. And I wore a Fonzie for President t-shirt and like combat boots. And I got there and there were all these like musical theater actresses there in like their perfect audition outfit. I was like, we're playing a dude, right? Like you're dress. This feels not wrong. And then I picked I had to pick a song, and I picked "You Light Up My Life,"
Which was already in
which
the show.
was in the show, but I didn't know that.
Right.
How weird is that?
And
Like,
you-
why would I pick "You Light Up My Life"?
And you never sang a lot of rock and roll before, did you?
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, I did, but I hadn't sung in a band, you know, in my
Right.
dreams, in my bedroom.
Neither had I.
I came in and did the workshop with you guys. And when I did the workshop, you were like, he's gonna move furniture and
Sing.
sing some, we don't know, sing some songs, and then we'll see what it, and it sort of evolved and then became the play, Yitzhak in the play, and then we had that great monologue that was, we had some great things that were
I think you made
cut.
him Jewish.
You made
He was
him Jewish?
originally Georg. Craig Chester, a guy played, in, you know, a cabaret
Yeah.
version. And then Stephen was like, I think we should have a female play
I love that.
Georg because we'd like to have that register of the voice in the backup singing. And then I'm like, well, why not a woman playing a man who wants to be dressed as a woman? You know, the flow of gender in Hedwig is free. You know, it's a mask that Hansel, after the forced gender reassignment, creates a beautiful mask called Hedwig. So we thought, why not have an actress playing a man who wants his own female mask?
Right. It was an interesting time, for drag performers and rock and roll performers and sort of gender issues, and this was all like a pre-moment that is
Yeah.
interesting because you sort of were on the other side of that right now.
Well, the queer thing, of course, came out of AIDS, and
Yeah.
it was a very angry scene in the 90s because so little had been done, and so many people were dying, and there was a fury in the air at this party, Squeeze Box. You know, Giuliani was coming in, who was another, you know, repressive figure. ACT UP was prominent.
And Queer Nation.
Queer
which,
Nation.
Which took on the same activism, but for queer issues in
For
general.
queer rights and such. And so there was quite a fury. I was coming out of my own, I'm tired of what I've been doing as a kind of pop-up actor in Broadway and TV. So Hedwig was my way out of that. And then Justin Bond came in
Amazing,
from
yeah.
San Francisco with that whole aesthetic and a whole character. And I remember seeing her at Cowgirl Hall of Fame, like
Yes.
in a restaurant window as this character,
Cowgirl.
you know, who was singing punk rock songs in a cabaret style with Kenny Millman and throwing drinks at people's heads and microphones at old ladies who were not paying attention. I was like
Walking on the table.
learning from that too. You know, Hedwig had that punk spirit, and then putting the punk in a restaurant, that's when I was thinking about the film. And I was like, Justin Bond as Kiki, you know, at Cowgirl Hall of Fame is to Hedwig at Bilgewater's. And I was like, I just worship Justin Vivian Bond.
It's a car wash, ladies and gentlemen. What a thrill.
It was a moment, and Clinton was ascendant. It was somehow cool to be, one of those moments where it was cool to be queer. And You know, like,
it was-
remember Clinton was into
It
it.
was cool to be queer, but it was still underground.
Exactly.
It
was
was
still
not.
it was
It
still
was
underground, right?
not.
Right.
We
It
used
was
to
hip, not
we used to put
Yeah.
out those when I started
still
Cheater, and it
downtown.
was like this very openly gay. And that wasn't really glam or punk. It was glam and punk influenced, but like alt rock, right? And when we started talking with the folks at Atlantic Records who did the Cast album, and they told me that they had been following Cheater. There were some guys who did college rock
Tracking
there.
it.
They had been tracking us, and we were too queer or not queer enough. It was like they're too queer to be just like on college radio, but they're not queer and protesting enough.
Right, like Frankie Goes to Hollywood.
We're not making an issue out
Well, they
of it. We're
couldn't.
just
They
being
couldn't sort
queer.
of classify you in a box that
We
had already
couldn't
been
be,
made.
we couldn't be in the box.
Stephen was caught between cracks, and he was also knew every again.
Always.
It's always between a crack. And you were so eclectic with your music too, and that wasn't even cool. You know, artists are told to do the same style, right? So they can be branded.
Horrible.
And both Stephen and I, and actors in general, I mean, you're the one that had the most style that is recognizably yours, but our jobs were to work for other people,
Yeah.
so we're necessarily eclectic, right? We have to be eclectic, and that's not star making or commercial. So when we started making the music, I was like, Stephen, we shouldn't tie ourselves. We should say, what does the scene need?
Right.
And then your classical, your jazz, your rock, your blues background would just filter into whatever that song was naturally.
Right. Yeah, I always tried to make sure I wrote a certain number of songs in a number of styles.
Yeah, which is actually not considered cool in some, you know, in an art way. It's considered pastiche and, you know.
But I feel like that filters into the film, how it
Each
was
scene
shot.
was shot the way it needed to be shot, rather
Yeah.
than have a style imposed upon the overall movie. Each
Yeah.
scene,
Like-
like the music, had its own feel
Camera.
and look.
Yeah. And the scenes when Hedwig was a child had that patina of like
the communist.
The cross process.
Eastern
remember?
Bloc,
Cross,
you know,
yeah.
and then
Process it,
you know, each scene sort of had its own.
And we wanted to shoot
vibe.
on film, which, you know, Hedwig comes out of the 70s, and her influences are on film, and she's not a slick character. She's not a digital figure. She put herself together, patchwork person. I would listen to the voices of the American masters. Tony Tennille, Debbie Boone, Anne Murray, who was actually a Canadian, working in the American idiom.
We talked a lot about binaries, because Michael is an English professor, and he taught me what deconstruction is. And,
That's your husband.
And it's my husband. And taking those binary relationships and really understanding them as just exploding that. And we spent a lot of time just talking about the way people have a sort of binary approach to looking at the world and how that's so important to how we define ourselves. But if you kind of explode that and get rid of that, it's kind of very freeing. And it was around the same time that the Berlin Wall had come down, and which we were talking about, but also was this moment where once the Berlin Wall came down, I mean, it says it in that song, but we don't know who we are anymore. Like, we needed that binary in order to understand, well, I'm this or I'm that. But when the literal wall went away, you're like, well, now what am I? Like, politicians don't know what side they're on.
In Tear Me Down, your lyric says, ain't much of a difference between a bridge and a wall. Without me right in the middle, you would be nothing at all. So the idea is, Hedwig, you know, when I was in Berlin, there was a boy named Peter Fechter who was 18 who tried to cross from the east to the west and was shot in the no man's land
And stayed there,
between
right?
the two walls. And because of the political situation, neither side came to help him. And for 2 hours, he bled out screaming while hundreds of people weeping watched him die from both sides. I remember reading that and welling up, and I'm like, this is little Hansel, philosophically. He's, by the very brutality of the binarchy and the patriarchy and all of those things that have power then and now, he is forced into a gender reassignment that he doesn't want and is left abandoned somewhere in the middle of male and female, east and west, money and no money. You know, it is a wall, and the danger is that it becomes a rigid barrier, or is Hedwig eventually a bridge. And the actual transformation is not the reassignment, it's later when abandoned and you take the wig down from the wall, you know, and you put the makeup on. That's the personal transformation that has to do with self-creation and agency. So that is one that any of us can understand, is that self-creation. And that was the philosophy that does say, fuck the binarchy. It's not necessarily political, but it's truly philosophical, that will eventually, hopefully, change laws too.
Yeah, but I mean, it's so fascinating because right now it is deeply political and social.
Yes, as well it should be now.
Yeah, yeah, but it's interesting to have been exploring it at a time when, you know, the language wasn't in the mainstream. That, you know, binary was a term that you would use in a philosophical conversation, not in a conversation about bathrooms in an elementary school. You know what I mean? Which it is now.
It's cool to see people of all genders, sexualities, ages, and permutations of saying that Hedwig is useful to think about what their identity can be.
Yeah.
It's not that it was a trans statement, it wasn't a drag statement, it was talking about self-performance, but it was also talking about the brutality of the binary. You're a woman.
Yeah.
And now you're a man. And you have to do certain things if you're one or the other, which has always led to distress and pain when there's a lot of no's. And Hedwig is about abuse and mutilation, yes, and rape even early on, but eventually is about getting out of the victim mode, you know, persecuting his Yitzhak and his band, and finding an inner union so that when the drag is ripped off, because the armor is necessary when you're gestating. You know, you need to be in the womb when you're gestating, but at the end of the piece, I don't need this anymore. I'm walking into the world naked. This is me. Whatever you want to call it. You choose the pronoun. I am Hedwig. And people could put themselves in that position and say, I am me. Do not hem me in. I'm not going to try to fuck you, but you can see I'm now vulnerable. I'm not hiding behind a mask. This is now me. And that is the goal of every person and every character, in effect, that's ever been written. It's like trying to get to that point. Though the drag is there, which means self-creation.
Right. But I thought you always felt like Hedwig was a character that could be played by anybody because the theme of finding yourself is
universal.
Beyond binaryism.
We've had all kinds of people play it. Some productions have 10 Hedwigs, one per song, of different genders and ages and sizes, race. You know, race is absolutely unimportant. You know, some people on Broadway are way too young to have experienced the early 60s. Who cares? It's a mask.
Right.
It's a role. You know, the audience knows it's theater. You know, put the mask on. Anyone can be Hedwig. You know, my favorite rock and roll moment was seeing Iggy Pop at Jones Beach, shouting in the middle of a song to the audience, I am you. I am you. And that's when he went into the crowd, and he was one of the first to really do that and swim in the crowd. Because even though he was a priest and a shaman, he was them. He wasn't a god. Bowie was a god. You know, Mick Jagger was God. My favorite people are their audience.
They're there,
And everyone feels like they can be Hedwig.
Which is in many ways the sort of progression from, yeah, this is me, fuck you, to this is me, let's all love each other, we're all part of a thing.
Yeah.
And it's like just a very subtle shift.
Well, we were a barely surviving off-Broadway production.
And internationally ignored.
Internationally somewhat noticed and then ignored. A lot of theater people were scared of it. The non-theater people were thrilled. You know, the David Bowies and the Lou Reeds and the Gallaghers and the Glenn Closes.
And the Pee Wee
Remember, we would always
Pee-wee
look out and
Hermans,
see who was in the
Gould and
audience.
Pete Townsend.
Barry
amazing.
Manilow and Marilyn Manson were together at the same
It
time.
would be like
Madonna.
B. Arthur and Madonna would be at the same time.
Madonna
and Pete Burns were there the same night.
That's right, and Elliott Smith.
And Elliott Smith was there that night, too.
Right.
Who I rode in the elevator with.
And
loved
Madonna
him.
Knotts. was there.
Madonna.
That's right.
McDonald's. No. But
I
we
was
were
only nervous about Elliott
we're
Smith.
like, why aren't we making any money?
When we were running here at the Jane Street Theater, we only created the impression that we were making money. Like we had the we had a
Were broken.
we had a, if anyone knows anything about theater, we had a $38,500 a week operating budget that if things got tight, they could get down to about 35, 36. And we rarely made it.
Broadway would be 400,000.
We rarely made it. But whenever we had a celebrity come, they made sure it was a sold-out house of people screaming, and then New York Post or someone would send a picture, and there's, you know, David Bowie and Isabella Rossellini and a packed house at the hit show Hedwig, and then the next night we'd be performing to crickets and tumbleweeds.
We were always the redheaded stepchild because we couldn't compare it to something and therefore market it well. But like a stubborn virus, she survives, and enough people feel strongly about it that it got her over the hump to the next form, being the film. There was a special time when people were making a lot of small films, which is not now.
Oh, it was the 90s.
It was the 90s, and we had New Line. We had all these wonderful, artisan companies that are gone. Say, what do you think about a film? Forrest Whitaker said, I want to direct it. I said, but I want to direct it. He goes, that would be a terrible mistake, John. I think Tim Burton was interested. We were all very flattered.
He was a squeeze box regular.
He was, that's right, Tim Burton. And it was very flattering. And then we went with New Line and with Killer Films with no experience. It was a very low budget film that would have been even lower now. That was a golden age, that a film by a first-time filmmaker could be made. And part of it was because Bob Shea and Mitch, your uncle, were at New Line, and Bob had directed me in a film in the 80s and said, we're gonna make another film, and he had tears in his eyes when he saw the show, and Mike DeLuca was there, and Danny DeVito was supporting it, and Glenn Close kept coming and coming.
Over and over.
But the sense was, how do I do this, I've never done it, I've never made a short. And I kept my instinct and said, okay, Frank, let's make the whole film together. Then it was bringing in Andy Marcus, an editor. Really a DP and an editor are and the director are the three, legs of the tripod. And we had a whole year to think about it, which was a luxury. Usually you get a few months. We definitely gather oddballs along the way. Therese was my hero. We worked with Todd Haynes and Spike Lee, and I was like, can we get a production designer of such quality? And she wasn't my tribe. I wanted to be in her tribe.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Hanging out with her at John Bruce's parties and just like,
But remember,
I want to be part of whatever she's a part
she's the
of.
most classiest, beautiful, generous designer yet, and she'd worked with our heroes already. And
so relatable. I remember you sending me to her and saying, if you think that it's worth for us to take you to Canada, we'll take you. So I brought a bunch of dolls and photographs and drawings, to Therese's house. And she was like, this is amazing. We're like, you're coming with us. I don't know what you're doing yet.
Yeah.
But you're coming.
You'll be doing something.
And I was like, yeah. And I stayed with her the whole day talking about Hedwig. Because by that time, we have met for a year. And you drew the whole storyboard yourself. With Mark, remember? That we sat every day,
Wait,
every
you
week.
storyboarded the movie?
Emily brought right in the fairy tale tone that we wanted for the whole piece. This was not a documentary, but we were using documentary film techniques.
Right.
It was not a Broadway musical, but we were bringing in theatrical makeup and hair. Mike had never done a film.
First movie.
He did the
Oh my
off-Broadway
God.
production.
It was
he did,
amazing.
I didn't know what continuity was. Ariane Phillips had to show me what it meant, and she's like, you don't know? And I'm like, I have no idea what that means.
Well,
I literally,
I found
continuity, no clue.
I found out what a shot list was because after the first day we did Tear Me Down, and you sang it like a number of times, then you went off to your dressing room. And Frank came up to me and said, all right, we have time to shoot footage of the band. What are some things I should shoot? Make me a list. And I got a napkin.
Some good licks.
And and that became our thing. Every day when you went back, I would write on a napkin the shot list.
You're like, my
for
ass.
Band coverage, my ass.
I think it was your black lipstick was my favorite.
Yeah.
Well, every department had their own relationship. Ariane Phillips, our costume designer, and Mike Potter, who did wigs and makeup, were just their own Mean Girls group.
But you let us take over and do whatever we wanted by the end.
Everyone, I
Like,
was
do
a
whatever.
Barbie. They put it on me. I sometimes would say, "But what?" And they were like, "No."
But we didn't even know. We were like, "Oh, what are you doing?" She's like, "I have these shoes. Can you make lips that like?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like
And they
that
were
day.
leftover pieces from like Charlie's Angels, which he
Britney.
had started and left. And I was wearing Britney Spears' skirt in the scene where he goes,
But then
"Love
again,
the front of me."
The hands.
Well,
With the hands, yeah.
Cameron Diaz's shirt was that heart shirt in Origin of Love. I was wearing the piece of everyone and channeling them, and perhaps purifying them, laundering them.
Wasn't the last scene we shot Wig in a Box? The okay, everyone now.
Okay, everybody.
It was 6 in the morning. We've been shooting all
We
night
had a
long.
20-hour day the last
That was
day.
crazy.
Yeah, and we were all so giddy. And if you watch that shot, I know that Michael Aronoff, who played the drummer, Schlapko, he and I couldn't get through it without laughing. So we're actually, I think we're lip syncing because we were laughing so hard in that moment because we were so giddy
I
and
had
so
no idea
overtired.
there was such a lack of discipline.
I'm so not professional.
That last day was pretty amazing because
Epic.
it was truly a 20-hour day. We had a giant room. We had a limo because I'm going to do the limo scene, with Tommy. It's fake limo, people bouncing in.
Yeah.
Then we had the trailer
With the
in there,
Yeah.
not the opening, but the
Inside it.
love the front of me.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, am I in the trailer scene? Love the front. No, that's the next scene. Love the front of me. He runs out. We can't shoot him running out because it would be shooting into craft service. Yeah. Then we had the Berlin Wall rubble, and we're shooting close-ups of the
gummy
Berlin
bear.
Wall.
Steamy gummy bears.
And then there was another set. It was like
We had a
5
musical number.
sets.
We had Wig in a Box.
Oh, then we had you're right, the trailer opening
Yeah.
up.
That's right.
The
That was
whole thing where
the diorama.
So the whole film we did
In
in
one
20 days, like a play.
Yeah.
And we were in Toronto, which is a magical land where dollars were worth less. We didn't know what was wrong or what was right. The ADs who were doing TV movies were like, this is impossible, this film is impossible. We're like, we don't know what that means. And would end up doing stuff that other people would be like, no, we're not doing this. And now we're bitter, and it's difficult to imagine.
Still doing it.
All of the actors who played the drummer or the bass player learned their parts, studying every day.
Some didn't play instruments.
Michael Aronoff learned how to play the drums.
Michael Aronoff
before.
learned how to play the drums, and he could play every solo,
He
every
did everything,
beat.
even on the little toy drum. He was.
No, he got complained in the hotel that he got complaints because he would be playing drums at like 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
And then they
now
call
he's
him,
won
like,
a Tony.
who's playing drums?
And so everyone studied their instrument, so everyone was actually playing the actual part that they played. And then there were monitors, what looked like everyone's personal monitor, so they could hear themselves in a live setting, was actually their part blasting out so that the sound of that musician was coming from where they were. So our actor audiences, our extra audiences, all thought that it was being performed live. They thought it was entirely a concert.
And then we
the
did
vocals.
And you sang
How do we do the
live.
vocals live? How do we do like all those takes?
Because we had a lot of cameras, and also,
cameras, yeah.
and if that was Frank's, he was like, if you can do this 5 takes, I can cover it. And the other trick I learned from Altman, because the 2 films that I thought of most for this were All That Jazz by Bob Fosse and Nashville. And Nashville's all the actors write their own songs and sing them live. But Altman used to shoot the audience first to get a more fresh reaction to the performance. So I had to do 6 times. But shooting them first, they got the real natural, like someone singing heavy metal in a fish restaurant. That natural thing. So these were tips that in that year we had a lot of time to think about. At the same time, we're thinking about the animation. We actually had a good amount of time.
We had a great amount of time because it was all set by the time you went to go shoot.
This was more animation director relationship than you really get in a film, because animation would be in and out of songs, in and out of scenes.
Right.
We couldn't actually shoot one scene, so I said, "Can you quickly animate
Make a
something
thing.
for me?"
It was coming up.
What scene was that?
And it was also
Getting born, you know, Hansel being born.
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't get born? I know. Yeah, no, it was really fun coming up with just the animated universe, the parallel universe that partnered with the real living universe. So even though I wasn't on the set, we were the alternate world of the animation that was Hedwig's history.
You used to send me faxes, I think, and be like, what did the hair look like? Does it look like this or this? And I would get a fax,
nervous.
and I'd be like, it looks like that, and like the hair is more wavy, and like I remember that. Like,
I was very
specifically
nervous
talking to you a
about
lot,
messing
like,
up the
hair.
depiction of the wig.
like on a cell phone or not even.
And then when you said draw all the wigs, I was
Nokia.
like, all the wigs?
How many wigs were
I
there,
don't know how
Mike?
to do
There were?
that.
33. I know. Yeah, something.
But,
How many were human hair?
A lot of them actually. And
The
don't
dress
you remember?
was human hair, remember? The
Well,
shag
that
wasn't it?
dress is like that dress was human hair, but you know we didn't get those wigs until the day of the camera test because I had a lady in New York and she had to go call Korea and like bitch out Korea to get them through customs because all of the wigs weren't like we didn't have the
The
wigs.
only way they could get them through were on people's heads. So it was very expensive.
I did a job where we had to leave like to South America and everyone had to wear a fur coat because they weren't allowed to have fur and we had to like wear them out onto the airplane. It's a true story. Truly, the stylist is like everyone needs to wear a fur coat.
I have to go.
Why?
Oh,
Don't leave.
That's so unexpected.
She's more successful than us. She has somewhere to be.
I have somewhere to be. I don't ever want to go again, though. I love you guys.
Maybe this Blu-ray will get us more work.
No, Hedwig 2, there will be a sequel, right?
Right?
There will be a sequel, right?
The song, The Origin of Love, Stephen's first song, was really the metaphoric center of the piece. And we had to make sure all those lyrics got out there. And sometimes it was a little hard in the rock venues to get, crisp sound. So we had drawings by James Humans.
And it's sort of, the song itself was, each couplet was written as if it was one page in an animated children's book.
Yeah.
So it's just started off with that
Just in little
concept.
episodes, right?
when I've done animation in films, a lot of times documentaries, it's because you have to get people to pay attention. They have to process the information.
Now there was 3 sexes, then one that looked like 2 men glued up back to back. They called the children of the sun.
People need to digest the meaning of those words and not just hear them.
And they're moving
so
very quickly. So
that
the visuals
happens
help.
with animation. Like my joke is I always say, if you want people to I'll just animate a dot. That's really all you need. People are going to be listening to the words and they'll get the information. You don't really have to see anything. It's just because they go into a different mode of thinking. So
It's like
when
meditation,
you're watching,
you focus on the dot.
yeah. So if you're focusing on these illustrations and not the person singing and not you're focused on the meaning that's being described, and then people really feel the information and they feel the emotion and they get the whole package.
Dinosaurs and the lizards, and then we grabbed up some bolts. He let out a laugh, said I'll split them right down the middle, gonna cut them right up in half.
Emily was just so perfect in every way because there's a kind of mythological weight to her character. She has also a kind of punk rock spirit, and it was a natural choice. And the tattoo being a kind of, the tattoo kind of being culmination is this idea of, the 2 faces not fitting, and we keep meeting people with that tattoo, which is...
There's a lot of people.
I'm glad we took the time, because remember, I was very picky.
I did a lot of
I
versions.
had the stamps, the original stamps that were made from your animations.
Yeah.
Of all, because those, it wasn't digital, it was, we stamped it, like it changed.
Tramp stamp.
Yeah, and it was like every kind of version of that face, there's a stamp of it, and I have like a bag of them. I found them. There's so much crap.
I knew there'd be people wanting to get a tattoo, and so I was very picky about the eye and where the slash goes. And
I know, and I was like, I don't understand what you mean.
we're faxing a lot.
up until then, being considered for things, I was on, are you sure you want me? Like, you could get someone better. You know, it's like, there's a lot of good animators. There's a lot of good animators out there. But with this, I actually felt, no, you know what? I think I'm the person you want. And that was like...
And you asked your mom, remember you told me that story recently.
Yeah, when I told my mom, she's going, that's exactly what you should do.
My parents weren't as supportive as yours. My parents
They were evolving at the time that we started.
Were they?
Yes.
Yeah, but they did it pretty fast. Because they're Jews. Mine were Catholic. Mine were very rigidly, the Pope can do no wrong, but the Pope is hiding the... Nope! And they were very charming. Like, my parents are probably the most charming people in the military or, you know, in the world. Yeah. But they come from very repressive backgrounds. So the fact, me, who was doing, you know, Secret Garden and other, you know, mainstream delights, to be like putting on a wig, why would you do that? Low-class stuff. Singing that loud music, and, you know, Stephen Sondheim came here to see the show and
hated
was very nice. He said, hated it.
He did.
You can imagine doing it like
yeah.
a California girl. Hated it. No, he didn't say that. He said, I didn't like it.
Oh.
Because it's not my style. I said, you only like your own style?
Yes.
Shouted in the dressing room. No, I did not. I respect him more than anyone. And I also liked that he was direct. He's like, it's not my kind of music. So we were the show for people who didn't really like musicals, but then realized they did, because it's still very much a traditional gypsy-like Broadway musical with an opening number and closing numbers, and like rooting for a character, and they sing their thoughts, and it's very traditional formally. It's just the content was unusual.
And you don't know if the ending is a psychotic delusion.
Yeah, the ending is something you can interpret, but drag has always been part of, drag is theater. I mean, at its very essence, and the fact that it was not considered classic theater in New York was absurd, because in Britain and Australia and ancient Greece and Rome and Shakespeare, you know, cross-gender casting was the very stuff of theater.
Japan,
kabuki, you know, Chinese opera.
I think Hedwig can be a vehicle for other people to be very personal.
Yeah, it's a vehicle. It's just a form that anyone can use. And that's the joy of role-playing, you know, of acting, is trying to get outside your own skin. And that's the beginning of empathy. You know, without fiction, there is no empathy. If it was all news, we would be polarized, numb, and angry. Sounds familiar. But, you know, there is a sense of now of panic, of like telling a story and making sure you get it right with consent waivers and trigger warnings. We never had many trigger warnings for Hedwig, and we probably triggered a few people. Yeah. You know, we make jokes about the Holocaust or about his abuse in order to heal them.
Yeah.
You know, everyone knows that Hedwig is like, despite its, you know, abrasiveness, there is always a moving into the light however you can, claw your way there, which is what we learned from the drag and trans performers that we grew up with and that I watched at Squeezebox. I just watched Jane County and Anoni and Laverne Cox. I remember, it's like these people have like lifetimes, not just their own lifetimes, in their performance of growing up in Alabama, of coming over from Germany, Klaus Nomi, and coming to the safe place called the stage to play a role, to heal yourself and heal your audience. Yeah. So to me, pass the wig on to the next person who needs it to be healed. You know, whatever your journey is very much this thing. And I think all of us here can say that the experience on Hedwig was a formative one.
Oh, yeah.
For all of us.
Yeah.
It led to so many good things.
Yeah.
You know the sun is in your eyes.
I knew very early on that this could be like an enduring work of art. It wouldn't just be a consumed piece of pop filmmaking, but it would last and endure and evolve and carry on. And I knew that deep in my heart, and just from the discussions John and I had, and then the references we used from Kubrick to to Nashville, Altman, to one of the references I never quite understood for a while was Cassavetes, because John would say, look at this Cassavetes film, I want Hedwig there to be just like this. I look at it like, cinematography was shit. It was terrible. It was like flat and horrible. Like the producer was the cinematographer. So what do you expect from like? What do you kind of? I'm like, I hope. Do I understand it? Does it want to look like this? You know, it's like. But what I didn't understand was John was talking about like allowing the actors to have this space to work and not be having to worry about hitting marks or finding the light or whatever. And it took me a while to sort of just. So, yeah, that's great. I love it. But I was completely misunderstanding that. But I think I wanted a film that would last, that would make it through ages, maybe, you know. And I think this is certainly, possibly.
I've always said Hedwig's hair and makeup. Thank God it was supposed to be kind of bad, but beautiful, because I didn't. Like I really did. Like, you know, it was very scrappy, like everything I did, and you know, and I'm very proud of it now. You know.
It's so thrilling to us, like when a show like Sex Education uses it as a reference and uses Origin of Love as an emotional linchpin, and it's like sincerest form of flattery isn't necessarily imitation, it's inspiration.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you made me want to do something else different, not to, because you can't really exactly imitate Hedwig anyway.
But I love all the people that still do it in whatever way they want it.
Yeah.
It's I love every one of them, and no matter how bad or amazing their version is.
You're right, when you're a little odd, it doesn't necessarily lead to huge amounts of work. But in the long run, we were a flop.
More meaningful.
Yeah, we were a flop in the theaters. You know, when we came out right before 9/11, and weirdly, many people first saw Hedwig on the day on September 12th because all the movie theaters were free. And so it's connected to a lot of people at that time. It gave them some comfort. It was a big hit in Japan, less so in Korea, but they took to it right away, and there were multi-year productions. It's still running in Korea after like 15 years.
Korea, which is the last place of the Cold War. So like they can
the
literally
North and
sing about a
South.
country
The wall.
divided in two, and it's still communism,
they get it.
and capitalism, and it's just the whole thing.
You know, if we were a more traditional play, we'd be on Broadway still but we needed stars, and you know, only so many people can do that role with the singing, and there's still limitations on it, but like individual communist terrorist cells, it springs up at different places, and you can't whack-a-mole it down. I mean, being also inexperienced, I was always just surrounding myself with the best people, and like an experienced DP and very experienced editor, Andrew Marcus, who comes from the merchant ivory world of Howard's End and Room with a View, and Andy Marcus was going to direct a film produced by Ishmael and James, and that got derailed. So he had a filmmaker's eye, and I didn't quite have one yet, and I got a wig on, and so there was a certain chaos. The editor was on set for a lot of it, which is unusual, but it was handy because, if we don't have a shot, and Frank and I were just rushing, you know, it was like nonstop, millions of cameras. A lot of Canadian people who had been doing Lifetime movies, confused at how fast we were moving, and there was no time to reach for a donut, and we're like, nope, we gotta, you know, I would grab a crew member's ass and say, shoot his ass for that shot. My ass is over here shooting something else. And then Andy would come out of the trailer and say, we don't have a close-up. And Frank was like, I'll get you a close-up. In fact, take this camera, Andy, and shoot it yourself.
Yeah.
And Andy became our B camera guy and shot a few gummy bears and things. And someone's
toilet. I think he shot toilet paper.
Toilet paper. I think he managed to shoot the ass shot.
Who did the
He did
the bishop in a turtleneck, which was another actor.
Which was
doing
the
the
grip
stomach.
son.
Which was the grip son. Tyler Faulkner.
Tyler, yeah.
Tyler
And
Faulkner,
you're
where are
genius,
you? You were a
and
great...
you're a genius bishop with a turtleneck.
We were always going overtime, but we squeezed every inch of our time in almost every shot we used. Part of that was also Therese Dupre, our production designer, being so prepared too, because we had talked. You know,
She had packages, remember, of every location. And part of shooting in the diner was that it was big enough the restaurant, remember? So it looked like it was a different location
Yes.
through the tour.
That was the biggest
There was-
question.
there was, amazing.
Hedwig's on
Yeah,
tour,
exactly.
and in the original
Oh,
script,
yeah.
I'm like in
That's all
an
there is, yeah.
airport bar.
Yeah.
I'm at a rest stop by the highway. I'm on a garbage scow. And
Behind it,
Therese is
remember?
like,
Bowling
oh,
alley.
oh no.
She was like all in one.
She's like, how about you're on tour in the same restaurant?
Exactly.
Chain.
We shoot in a corner, in a different
Around
corner. Yeah.
the country.
And the tire were back and behind.
And she
remember?
came up with a hilarious themed restaurant,
Yeah.
one that's going out of business, which was Bilgewater's, which was the sinking ship-themed restaurant. Have a burger, have some fish,
Laughter Monday.
while watching screaming people going down
Going down.
on, and on posters on the wall. And it was like Bilgewater's.
Yesterday's clams at yesterday's
Yesterday- yeah.
prices.
That was my favorite one. Yesterday's clams at yesterday's prices.
I remember her building that hotel room, that like cluttered hotel room, out of like nothing in like hours. I remember going, it was an empty stage, and then I came back, and she had built the hotel room where they were all sleeping, where their crap was everywhere. Literally like a straw.
She was like a
perfect.
dollhouse type of director, like every tiny prop. And we were in awe because we were in installations more than sets.
Right, and
every
what was great about
weekend.
that hotel room, it was as if we were in a chain of hotels, but we could only afford a cheaper room every time.
Didn't we?
It was the
getting
same
smaller.
set, but the walls moved and the room just
we
kept
were
getting
making them
smaller and
smaller.
smaller. It was the same wall.
Same pink walls.
Yeah.
There's a lot of jokes like that that you don't catch.
In the last scene, the room is
Tiny.
the exact
With the
size
pizza,
of the
when
bed.
you guys get
Yeah,
the
it's
pizza,
just so small. But an example is, her East Germany design was so good.
That apartment with the silk screen, there was a photo, but also
It was beautiful work. Like
the photograph. Remember, there was a photo of the Berlin Tower that you took. That
Yeah.
she understood that added some warmth.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be any photo, but like the one that you took.
Yeah,
you
I
know?
went to East Berlin. My father was the military commander, so I went and brought back photos, and she would Xerox a photo
Yeah.
of a big tower and put it as a diorama behind the window in Berlin. So it was really a Xerox.
Wow. But
of
the
a
nice thing
building.
too is instead of just doing that as like a normal, the way you do a translate, a backdrop, we deliberately cocked it so like the perspective was
Yes.
wrong. So it was more like a
Yeah. It was
cartoon.
impossible, exactly.
Yeah.
It was
And-
very
and-
cabinet
and
of Dr. Caligari, which
Yeah.
of course is very Berlin. And my favorite thing, when she always had creative ways of overcoming our budgetary thing, which is, she's just so good at it. Once I had a shot of like, well, we need the Berlin Wall with the McDonald's arches over the top, and I'm like, where are we gonna get a wall? And she's like, I can do what I can, and it's like the McDonald's issue, we can't show too much of it because it's not fair use and there's legal issues. And then I said, so this Xerox of the wall that I took, what if we just put it up in front of a real McDonald's?
That's right.
Arches and Frank do this, so
Yeah,
it looks
that's
like a wall,
right.
but it's a Xerox.
What did we do?
That's
Did we
the way-
go out somewhere and get a parking lot?
We went in front of a McDonald's
Yeah.
with a Xerox and
Yeah,
went
I vaguely remember.
Berlin. So there was that constantly
And
happening.
We run, every weekend we'll go to flea markets and to stores that, sell like old things and bought stuff.
Hedwig's
that-
costumes were all from by the pound stores. In the Valley, Ariane and I went shopping, and other
Right.
stuff you made, like the cape, was custom, but a lot of it was just literally like,
By the
25 cents a pound. Like the whole outfit, the Ricky Lee Jones in the mall with the pink beret, probably cost $5.
Therese never slept,
No.
and she never stopped working.
It would affect her health too. I mean, she
Yeah.
killed herself for these shows,
Yeah.
and she worked to the limit. But production designers are often not where you're shooting. She
was in every location.
preparing.
Yeah.
She's all the time there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it
Glues
was-
things to the wall. Remember, like
Yeah.
Remember when she brought the trailer to set, like on a flat, and we were like, oh, the trailer with the wall comes down, and she's gonna bring it over to show to everybody, and we were like, oh my God. Like the rope and the wall came down.
That was our pièce de résistance.
I
when
mean,
she-
the money shot. That was the one crane, remember?
Yeah,
Wasn't
we
it?
only had 2 takes, and it was like not quite working, but we made it work.
It did.
In that trailer park where everyone, the neighbors, we had to give them like $50 to not call the cops.
And Frank is like, I
Underneath
need...
antenna.
Yeah, totally.
There was the electronic pylon.
The pylon, right.
And I was like, we have to light this. Frank, do you have 10 Ks? And he's like, just give me a few CDs. And a single light.
So bounce the light off the
Flashlight,
All
right?
those lights on the tower are from
Beautiful.
somebody going
Mike
like this
Affer
with a
had
CD.
some rig from something he did, and I said, well, then take the light and
And it
bash
was a
into
CD from one of my failed musical projects, too. I think it was definitely the hardest thing I will ever do,
Right.
because I was acting and directing for the first time, and the makeup and the hair and the wigs, and I don't think I took a shit for 2 weeks. And I was like, is this a natural thing that happens when you do a film? And then, you know, and then there was something, I don't know.
Retaining everything.
At the end of the 2 weeks, there was, you know, the devil was born. And it was more stressful than anything I've ever experienced. But I think I was just at the right age, that I was just young enough to be able to get through it, and old enough to know what I liked. You know, I didn't know what I was doing, but I know what I liked. And then Frank would show options, but also aware of needing a parameter where people can improvise and do their work. And like, Mike, just hit me with the wig on me, Mike. You know, and
Hurt me.
Rarely did we ever disagree on anything. I think I brought one costume that Ari.
There were tears and accusations a few times.
There was some recrimination. I think it was when she was doing.
There's still.
Yeah, because he made me shave my eyebrows, and they never quite grew back.
Really? They look great today.
You didn't. It's because I colored them in. Why didn't you tell me that was going to
It
happen?
happened to Lana Turner as well. Her eyebrows never grew back.
I don't need to be compared to a dead woman.
I remember shaving those eyebrows in your hotel room. It was not a good.
I have pictures. I have
gonna go
pictures
back.
of it. I have
What?
I have pictures of it.
Yeah, and that's why we did those crazy, like weird, like Boy George eyebrows during like the
Great.
Berlin Wall, because we didn't have any eyebrows, and we're like, how would we make his eyebrows? We figured he'd probably have like these weird, like.
And there was experimental looks that Mike did, such as the Sam Kinison look, who's a name not as well known
But
now.
the close-ups on that.
Turban. I was wearing a turban in the hooker scene.
But we reshot the close-ups on that,
And they're like
beautiful.
20% worse.
No, you look way better in the close-ups that we reshot.
Well, it was partly Frank's fault, because he was doing light from below, which
No,
is
'cause we
something I
shot-
learned to
remember-
never do again.
We went back to Canada. We went back to Canada for like 2 days because they
that's
gave us
right,
more
that's
money,
right.
and we
had
got
to
to
go-
reshoot the limo scene.
That's why I'm so
remember that.
grateful to Bob Shea, who ran New Line. He was doing Lord of the Rings and betting the farm on Lord of the Rings, which was all their money, and if it failed, the company would be dead. And he still lavished time and money on Hedwig, because he felt avuncular, as he said about it. He really cared, and he let us do a reshoot, and which was rare, to fix some things. After Sundance, I felt rushed, so he let me recut negative and change some things and remix, which is like hundreds of thousands of dollars. The idea of this being something that is a message in a bottle throughout the world, to fly your freak flag, but also create your own community of creativity, not just a fuck you, but let's fuck. It's really like, let's all throw me what you got, give me what you got. My dad was a general in the Army and was upset when I didn't become a military person. But then when he saw me on set going, I don't know, what do you think? Go ahead. It's like, I love what's going on here.
It's Johnny the General.
Frank, the light should go higher. I look like Sam Kinison. Mike, how do you know how to do this when you've never done a film?
Yeah.
Miguel, who had just arrived in this country, give me a penis puppet.
Yeah.
Give me a penis puppet. And then everyone was just allowed to do their thing. Delegation was my dad's thing too. And he's like, you're a general now. And I was like, I am. I got drafted. And he was really proud. My parents, who really, this is not their world, very religious, saw that Hedwig was healthy and useful to the world, and made people happy.
And positive too, like super, yeah.
Yeah, it was positive. You know, it wasn't a thumb your nose. It was actually question things, but also remember that we're all fighting this great battle, and to be kind. You know, ultimately, it's a kind film about someone who feels like a victim, who has to break that victim thing.
From your heart to your brain, knows that you're whole.
I don't think it could have happened without that key group of people that we had, your music people, him being in charge of that department, so I didn't have to freak out about it. You know, Mike having never done this, but like learning immediately, fast, having Ariane, very experienced as a support, teach you. Miguel just throwing his, you know, powers in there. And then Frank, who had worked on a lot of smaller things and knew how to move quickly, but it was also a wonk in terms of film and gadgets. And then Emily, who was doing her own cosmology within, but we'd had enough time to think about it. And with Therese and Andy, it's a kind of a dream team that has never been quite so perfect.
It was just fun, like having all of these responsibilities that no one ever would have given you because you're not at all qualified, and just knowing that you can do it anyway, just was a blast.
I just remember feeling it and like loving it and being there, and just you were easy to make beautiful, and that was my job.
Why did you rip my eyebrows?
I didn't rip them off, I shaved them off.